It seemed like the Archangel of Death stood and looked on with outstretched wings, while all the earth was silent. When all at once, 100 guns from the Federal line opened upon us. And for more than an hour, they poured their solid and chain shot, grape and canister, right upon this salient point, defended by our regiment alone, when, all of a sudden, our pickets jumped into our works and reported the Yankees advancing. And almost at the same time, a solid line of bluecoats came up the hill. Hi, my name is Bill Coughlin, and host of First Person Civil War Podcast. For almost 2 months, the Union Army marched and fought its way from Chattanooga into the Deep South, and was now within 20 miles of its objective, the city of Atlanta. After several attempts to force Major General Sherman to fight on a prepared position, General Johnston fortified his army on one of the last natural barriers that stood in the Union Army's path. Now, listen to a 22-year-old man from Muskingum County, Ohio, as his regiment charged the V-shaped trenches held by a 25-year-old man from Maury County, Tennessee, and soon to be named the Dead Angle at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. Episode 66 is entitled The Dead Angle at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain and relies on 2 primary sources, both published in 1900. The first is Dan McCook's Regiment, 52nd Ohio Volunteer Infantry, A History of the Regiment, Its Campaigns, and Battles, by Nixon B. Stewart. And the second, Company Aytch, Maury Grays, 1st Tennessee Regiment, or A Sideshow of the Big Show, by Sam Watkins. If you would like a map reference, I recommend American Battlefield Trust's Kennesaw Mountain map of the Dead Angle, dated 27 June, 1864. Nixon B. Stewart was born on 14 May, 1842, in Muskingum County, Ohio. The son of a farmer, Nixon did not volunteer at the outset of the war, and instead moved east and became a teacher. It was on the 13th day of August, 1862, while teaching in New Alexandria, Jefferson County, Ohio, that we heard the shrill notes of the fife and the drumbeat signals that our country's flag was in danger. It was noontide. Calling the children to the front of the building, we mounted the steps, told them the Great War had opened in earnest, and said, "We must be off." A hasty goodbye was said. Nixon enlisted that day as a corporal in Company E of the 52nd Ohio, and commanded by Colonel Daniel McCook. The 52nd Ohio fought at battles such as Perryville, Stones River, Chickamauga, and Chattanooga. By the summer of 1864, Nixon Stewart was now a sergeant, and the 52nd Ohio marched in the 3rd Brigade, commanded by their old regimental commander, Colonel McCook, in Brigadier General Jefferson C. Davis's 2nd Division, of Major General John M. Palmer's 14th Corps, of Major General George H. Thomas's Army of the Cumberland, of the Military District of the Mississippi, commanded by Major General William Tecumseh Sherman. Samuel Rush Watkins was born on 26 June, 1839, in Maury County, Tennessee. He grew up on the family farm, and by the 1860 census was a store clerk. But on 1 May, 1861, Sam Watkins enlisted in the Maury Grays as a private, which soon reflagged to Company H of the 1st Tennessee Infantry. Save for a brief time in Virginia, Private Watkins fought in the Western Theater, on battlefields such as Shiloh, Perryville, Stones River, Chickamauga, and Chattanooga. By the summer of 1864, Private Watkins and the 1st Tennessee had consolidated with the 27th Tennessee, and marched in Brigadier General George E. Maney's brigade, of Major General Benjamin F. Cheatham's division, of Lieutenant General William J. Hardee's Corps, of the Army of Tennessee, commanded by General Joseph E. Johnston. Since 1 May, Sherman's army of approximately 100,000 men began their march toward Atlanta in the face of the smaller Army of Tennessee. General Johnston recognized this numerical superiority and carefully selected ground to oppose Sherman's advance. Given his army's size, Sherman preferred to march around the Confederate flanks. But by late May into early June, the two armies had met on several battlefields, such as Resaca, New Hope Church, Dallas, and Pickett's Mill. Despite some successes, General Johnston retreated after these last three battles and erected lines of entrenchments to the north and west of Marietta, Georgia, but he chose to retreat to a more defensible line which incorporated Kennesaw Mountain, an imposing geographical feature north of Atlanta that Sherman called the key to the whole country. By late June 1864, with the city of Atlanta approximately 20 miles to the southeast, Sherman decided that he could not march around Kennesaw Mountain. He would have to attack it. By the time the Confederates occupied Kennesaw Mountain, Private Watkins and the 1st Tennessee were well accustomed to digging trenches wherever they happened to be placed in line. The battles around the Kennesaw line were fought for weeks. Cannonading and musketry firing was one continual thing. It seemed that shooting was the order of the day, and pickets on both sides kept up a continual firing that sounded like 10,000 wood choppers. Sometimes the wood choppers would get lazy or tired, and there was a lull. But you could always tell when the old guard had been relieved by the accelerated chops of their wood choppers. Kennesaw Mountain, as a terrain feature, provided a strong natural barrier for the Confederates. With a summit of about 1,800 feet, it jutted to the south for approximately 2 miles. One of the smaller hills that Private Watkins and the 1st Tennessee occupied became known as Cheatham Hill, named after their division commander. As the Tennesseans dug in, their entrenchments followed the natural contour lines of the hill in the shape of a V. On 26 June 1864, Private Watkins celebrated his 25th birthday in the trenches of Cheatham Hill. The next day, he would face the Union assault. Sergeant Stewart and the 52nd Ohio had an early start on the morning of 27 June. From 4 to 6 a.m., the regiment busied themselves for the bloody work that was to come. When soldiers get ready for battle, they generally go like men on business. The old blouse is good enough. The old hat will answer. You may notice they look to their guns a little more critically. They tighten up their belts a little and are ready. Officers seldom wore their finery in the field. The torn bars, the slipped eagle, the dim star will do, but it is not always so. I have known a soldier to make a most careful toilet on the morning of the battle. For several days, Private Watkins and the 1st Tennessee were subjected to artillery barrages during the day. But on the morning of 27 June, the sun came up and it was not accompanied by artillery. He instead witnessed the Union lines array themselves for battle, which included the 52nd Ohio. We all knew it was but the dead calm that precedes the storm. On the distant hills, we could plainly see officers dashing hither and thither, and the stars and stripes moving to and fro. And we knew the Federals were making preparations for the mightiest contest. We could hear the rumbling sounds of heavy guns, and the distant tread of a marching army, as a faint roar of a coming storm, which was soon to break the ominous silence with the sound of conflict, such as was scarcely ever heard before on this earth. To assault Cheatham Hill, Colonel McCook formed his 3rd Brigade into a column with the 52nd Ohio as the rear regiment. Before leading his men forward, Sergeant Stewart witnessed Colonel McCook quote Horatius at the Bridge, a poem by Thomas Babington Macaulay of 3 men who held the bridge to Rome against an Etruscan army. Then spoke bold Horatius, the captain of the gate. To all men of the earth cometh, soon or late. But how can men die nobler when facing fearful odds? For the ashes of his fathers and the temple of his gods. Once the 14th Corps was arrayed for the assault, the Union Army opened with an artillery barrage centered upon Cheatham Hill, held by Private Watkins and the 1st Tennessee. It seemed like the Archangel of Death stood and looked on with outstretched wings, while all the earth was silent. When all at once, 100 guns from the Federal line opened upon us. And for more than an hour, they poured their solid and chain shot, grape and canister, right upon this salient point, defended by our regiment alone, when, all of a sudden, our pickets jumped into our works and reported the Yankees advancing. And almost at the same time, a solid line of bluecoats came up the hill. As Sergeant Stewart and the 52nd Ohio advanced, they lost 4 color bearers, and the brigade's cohesion began to break down. But onward they charged upon Cheatham Hill. Sheets of flame baptize us. Plunging shot tear away comrades on left and right. It is no longer shoulder to shoulder. It is God for us all. We are facing the steady fire of 2,000 infantry, pouring down upon our heads as if it were the old historic curse from heaven. We wrestle with the mountain, but our brave men are climbing steadily on, upward still. Things are growing desperate. The enemy begin to throw stones upon our heads. They light the fuse and throw hand grenades in our faces. Private Watkins, veteran of the bloodiest battles of the Western Theater, faced the brunt of the Union assault upon the trenches which were at that moment earning its new name of the Dead Angle. I discharged my gun, and happening to look up, there was the beautiful flag of the Stars and Stripes flaunting right in my face. And I heard John Branch of the Rock City Guards, commanded by Captain W.D. Kelly, who were next Company Aytch, say, "Look at that Yankee flag! Shoot that fellow! Snatch that flag out of his hand!" My pen is unable to describe the scene of carnage and death that ensued in the next 2 hours. Despite the mounting casualties of the 52nd Ohio and the 3rd Brigade, the Illinoisans, Hoosiers, and Ohioans continued their charge, and Sergeant Stewart witnessed the death of even more of his comrades. Our brave colonel, urging his men on, was struck as he said, "Come on, boys! The day's won!" As he reached the earthwork, he was shot about 4 inches below the collarbone in the right breast, falling outside of the fortifications. After the fall of Colonel McCook, the voice of Captain Charles Fellows of McCook's staff was heard, but its half-finished, "Come on, boys, we'll take," was cut short, and brave Charlie fell dead only a few feet from the ditch. The 5 regiments in front of the 52nd Ohio all tried and failed to wrest the dead angle from the 1st Tennessee in their front. It was now up to Sergeant Stewart and the Ohioans to rush the trenches. Several colors were planted in the loose earth at the foot of the ditch. We learned from a member of the 1st Tennessee Infantry that Captain Beasley of that regiment had lost his life while attempting to grasp the colors of the 52nd Ohio. Our regiment preserved a fair alignment to the last, and was undoubtedly assisted in the final stand by many members of other regiments. No braver and better behaved men ever attempted to storm an impregnable fortress than the Illinois and Indiana boys who were slaughtered in that terrible assault. Regiment after regiment attempted to wrest the dead angle from the Confederates, but there was no success in it. For Private Watkins, the 1st Tennessee, and the other regiments that occupied the trenches, The men were determined to hold to the last. Yet still the Yankees came. It seemed impossible to check the onslaught, but every man was true to his trust, and seemed to think that at that moment, the whole responsibility of the Confederate government was rested upon his shoulders. For a seasoned veteran like Private Watkins, the fighting on Cheatham Hill that summer day in 1864 was unlike anything he witnessed before or since. Talk about other battles, victories, shouts, cheers, and triumphs. But in comparison with this day's fight, all others dwarf into insignificance. The sun beaming down on our uncovered heads, the thermometer being 110 degrees in the shade, and a solid line of Yankee guns being poured right into our very faces, singeing our hair and clothes. The hot blood of our dead and wounded spurting on us. The blinding smoke and stifling atmosphere filling our eyes and mouths. And the awful concussion causing the blood to gush out of our noses and ears. And above all, the roar of battle made it a perfect pandemonium. Afterward, I heard a soldier express himself by saying that he thought, "Hell had broke loose in Georgia sure enough." The Confederate trenches at the dead angle were too strong for Sergeant Stewart, the 52nd Ohio, or any other regiment to carry. Due to the intensity of the engagement, Union soldiers had no choice but to hastily dig trenches of their own. For Sergeant Stewart and the 52nd Ohio, they soon found themselves between two opposing lines of trenches. Probably one half of our regiment that were unharmed lay within 12 feet of the earthworks and not in a position to load and fire. One by one, our men crawled back to the new line below, while many of us, with the dead and seriously wounded, lay near the works. While lying there with a dead soldier across my feet, who could describe the sensation of the 40 minutes that passed? To run the gauntlet might mean death. To lie there, a movement of the body would draw fire of the enemy on the dead angle to our right. The comrade shot in the temples sat up and began to talk in delirium, which attracted the enemy. He pleaded for water. I pushed my canteen toward him, and he reached out but failed to get it. Unable to carry the trenches, Union soldiers began to dig a mine shaft to blow up the occupants of the dead angle. But this was never used. Having survived hell on earth, Private Watkins joined in a temporary truce to attend to the dead which littered the battlefield. On the third morning, the Yankees raised the white flag, asking for an armistice to bury the dead. Not for any respect either army had for the dead, but to get rid of the stinking stench. I get sick now when I happen to think about it. Long and deep trenches were dug, and hooks made from bayonets crooked for the purpose. And all the dead were dragged and thrown pell-mell into these trenches. Nothing was allowed to be taken off the dead, and finely dressed officers with gold watch chains dangling over their vests were thrown into the ditches. During the whole day, both armies were hard at work, burying the Federal dead. The two sides remained in those trenches for several more days, until 2 July, when Sherman continued his advance with yet another flank march, which forced the Confederates to vacate their trenches. 2 more months of fighting ensued, but by 2 September, the city of Atlanta was in Union hands. While lying between the two lines, Sergeant Stewart noticed 17-year-old Private Newton H. Bostwick of Company I with severe wounds in the shoulder and neck. Sergeant Major James A. Jennings of the 1st Tennessee ordered Private Bostwick to cross over to the Confederate trenches to receive medical attention, which he did. Sergeant Major Jennings accompanied Private Bostwick to the hospital that day, and even exchanged addresses. After his recovery, Private Bostwick became a prisoner of war and exchanged in November of 1864. In 1880, Newton Bostwick wrote a letter that was published in the Nashville American, looking for the Sergeant Major of the Rock City Guards. or any other Confederate soldier who was at the dead angle on 27 June 1864. Dear Sir, I should like to know something of you. You treated me well while I was a prisoner with you on the field that day, June 27, and I have ever since felt a friendly feeling toward you. I am the boy with the cocked hat and the white acorn, who fell inside your works that warm morning in June. You fought like the devil and made a hot place for us to come through. But it always seemed to me that if we could have held out a little longer, the fortunes of the day might have changed. Please write to me. I want to know what has become of you boys. The letter eventually made it to James Jennings, who sent a reply. We right well remember the 27th of June, 1864. I was Sergeant Major, and well remember the boy with the cocked hat and acorn. How you were shot through the neck as your men shot at me, and that you was a brave boy. I lost your address. I was captured in Hood's last fight and remained a prisoner until the cruel war was over. We lost but few men at Kennesaw, as we were well fortified. The slaughter on your side was terrible. We were almost out of ammunition. I think if you would have put another fresh line in, you would have got us. But we had our orders to hold that place. And you know what kind of boys we were. We would be glad if you could pay us a visit. We will make it pleasant for you. The war is over, and we must be the best of friends. In union, there is strength. Thank you for listening to the 66th episode. Links to Sergeant Stewart's and Private Watkins' open source books are now available on the podcast website, firstpersoncivilwarpodcast.com. On Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn this week, you will find pictures of both men during the war. On 2 September, Captain Charles F. Walcott of Company B, 21st Massachusetts, provides next episode's first-person account at the Battle of Chantilly. My name is Bill Coughlin, and thank you for listening to First Person Civil War Podcast.